we'll get started now. I hope you've all found a comfortable seat. I hope you've had a glass of wine. It's really excited to have you here today. This locale, of course, is the Swedish History Museum. The roof above us is from the 1600s. It's from an old Swedish church somewhere. It's an original. It's very exciting. We're here today because of UF's EU project. This is the fourth and last seminar that we're arranging on it. We've previously talked about peace, conflict, climate, and now, of course, we're going to be talking about culture. Human rights, freedom of speech, these are all important topics for the EU and the shared values within the Union. And we were curious and wanted to learn more about how culture can figure in this and what's culture's role for these values. Sadly, as you might be able to see on the picture, Emma's not here with us today. She couldn't make it. And yeah, the evacuation as well, if that happens, just the same way that you came from. And I think that's all the information I have to share with you now. Ylva Bergman will be our moderator. It's amazing to have her here. We're super excited for it. She is the chief editor at Aktuell Hållbarhet. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me, and afterwards we will interact a little bit. The seminar will start with me inviting some very interesting guests, and I will talk to them. Then there will be an interaction for you to answer some questions, and then a discussion with the results from this Mentimeter, and then we will take questions from the audience. Briefly about me, I'm Ylva Bergman. I'm an editor-in-chief of Aktuell Hållbarhet. If you don't know what that is, it's a business magazine for the business sector working with transformation to a more sustainable world. We are covering politics, we are covering policies, we are covering tools, how to change for a better environment and social justice. But I just want to give you a little glimpse of where we're standing at today. Did you know that today it was actually 30 years ago since Sweden said yes to the EU? That was a totally different setting, right? The Berlin Wall had come down, 9/11 hadn't happened. We, at least me, when I was young, I thought, this is happening now. This is a change. Now it's happening. It's going to be better. And yet here we are in a world with a lot of turbulence. Climate crisis, we see temperatures rising. We see the biggest emissions that has been counted for so far. And this year we'll probably have a temperature of 1.5. We also see polarization in politics. We see authoritarian values rising with the US election and also with the EU election. We have a lot of countries with populistic governments or populistic parties in coalitions. So this is where we stand 30 years later. And the question is, oh, I forgot almost, but sorry, the terrible wars that the EU are also part of. The Ukraine and the Middle East, of course. So here we are in a totally different world. And how can culture matter in this context when human values are challenged and human rights, expression, freedom, artistic freedom? That's what we're going to talk about today. You know that the EU has human rights like the UN enshrined in its foundation and believes in freedom of expression and so on, like Axel said. So that's like a core value for the EU. But that's also being threatened now with the map of the countries within the EU. So what can culture do? Can culture be a guiding force? Can culture be a threat? Can culture be a guardian? Today, to discuss this, we have some very interesting panelists. And I will start with a very famous human rights defender and rock musician, Ramy Essam, who became known as the voice of the Egyptian revolution, where his music was an anthem for freedom, justice, and social change. And he has had a very interesting journey since then with both struggles, but also huge success from his music. So please welcome Ramy Essam. Another very interesting artist that we have with us in the panel is Diego Galafassi, who is a Brazilian artist who works in transdisciplinary context. He's from Brazil, he's based in Stockholm, he's researching at the Stockholm University, and he works in the interface of art, science, and co-creative processes. He's the founder and lead artist at the Hum Interactive Studios, a member of the Guild of Future Architects, an alumni at the Sundance Institute for New Frontier Lab, and also an artist in residence at Johns Hopkins University. Please welcome Diego. You can sort of stand around the table here, and we will have to interact with the microphones. Maybe someone, I don't know if we're going to do this ourselves. Do you want to put this one on? Okay, so maybe Diego, you can take this. Yep. And then we will share. It's not, you know, super professional sound system, but it will make it better anyway. So, and then of course we have Hanna Gjerdes, a human rights lawyer, a chair of civil rights defenders, a public educator, lecturer, and an author of several books. Welcome up on stage, please. Equal rights and human rights, that's your issue. And you could maybe also take one of these. Could you help her, Ramy, to put it on? Finally, but not least, we have a former minister of International Development Cooperation and State Secretary to the Minister of Culture, Per Olsson Frid, who is now a General Director of Folke Bernadotte Academy. Please, welcome, Per. So, I thought you could stand over there, so you can feel a little bit threatened by my questions. I'm just joking. If someone stands, can you all see them? Come closer in the light. Come closer in the light. Maybe someone can stand next to me. I don't know. You want to stand here? Yeah? That's good. Is that okay? Can you all see us and hear us? And we will interact with the microphones, yeah? I'm going to start with Hanna, because you have an overview of the global situation from your work and your long work with human rights. Can you describe to us how culture can be used in the fight for human rights and artistic freedom?
Yeah, so let's see if this works. Does it work? No?
Okay, then maybe Ramy can give you the microphone, the one.
This one? Oh, no, it works. It works. Perfect.
It's not like on television, but almost.
So, thank you so much. So, I talked with Ylva before, and she said that could you just give us some few thoughts on how culture and human rights are interlinked? And well, I would love to do that actually, because culture and human rights are interlinked in so many ways. Culture, first and foremost, is at the core of all kinds of freedoms. But culture is also an effective method of repression. So speaking about culture and human rights, we need to acknowledge this complexity. So what I try to do, because as you said, I also work quite a lot with civic public education, I try to put this down in 6 ways, how culture and human rights are interlinked. And I would like to also give you a concrete example of all these ways. So first of all, and first and foremost, is that, of course, the right to culture, it is a human right in itself. Second of all, culture is a way of protesting, visualizing, and pushing for fundamental freedoms. And I know, Ramy, you're a perfect example of that, and we'll be hearing more about that. Culture is also a way of explaining human rights. Culture is a way of abusing human rights. Culture is a way of hiding and neglecting human rights, whose history is actually told. And culture is also a way of a redress after severe human rights violations, or a way of process and of trauma and grave injustices. So, like, I tried to split that up into these, and I would give you some few examples, if that's okay. So, first of all, the right to culture being a human right. Well, in international law context, since I'm a human rights lawyer, the right to culture, it's primarily found and derived from the International Convention on Economical, Social, and Cultural Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The right to culture, in a legal sense, it's defined as the right to access, participate, and enjoy culture. And what this actually stipulates in not so legal terms is, for example, the right for an author to have the freedom to write his books, a scientist to have the freedom to conduct research, but also for us to take part of these books, to read these books, and to take part of the scientific progress. So, and culture also as a human right, it's very closely interlinked with most other basic civil and political rights, like the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom of thought, the freedom of movement, the freedom of assembly. And since this is an EU also seminar, I think it's important to stress that in the European context, the EU Charter on Fundamental Rights also guarantees the right to culture. The Charter, if you don't know this, it's a legally binding legal document, and it applies to all the institutions and the bodies of the EU, and all of their actions, as well to national authorities in all of the EU countries when they implement EU law. So what does this mean? What does Article 13 say? It says art and scientific research shall be free of constraint. I think this is quite important to remember in these days. And academic freedom should be respected. So this is actually legally binding. So being a human right, it's legally binding. It's not just a matter of opinions.
I know that you also work with a lot of protecting human rights activists around the world.
Yeah.
Could you just give us a brief outlook on what is the situation like at the moment? Globally.
Well, absolutely. I will definitely do that. If it's okay, I will give these examples also, because I would like to go through these different parts, as I told about in the beginning, just to give concrete examples. But the situation is quite bad. I mean, 72% of all the people in the world right now live in countries that are not free democracies. And so what does that mean? It means a lot of things, but it means a lot more than not being able to freely elect your leaders. It also means a grave impeachment that we see in many countries right now on the freedom of speech, on the freedom of thought, on the freedom of assembly, and of course that becomes a great impeachment on the right to culture, because it's the necessity of culture is based on all these rights. So I would say it's quite a bad situation, and culture, I mean, as I said, is also a way to protect and visualize the human rights. I just came back from Bogota like 2 weeks ago, and I met human rights defenders, a lot of them, different human rights defenders on different causes, some of them being climate activists, some of them being artists. And I met, for example, a young feminist collective called Derecho a no obedecer, which means the right not to obey. And they use culture for disruption in the public space. So what does this mean? They try to show the grave human rights abuses made, for example, against women in different ways. So one thing they did, they took a piece of water within the city of Bogota and they filled it with red paint to show that this is the blood flowing from all the women who are actually killed. And they took a lot of artists, putting them on big squares, like 100 people with white things over them that were red paint, to show these are as many women that have been killed. So this is one way. I mean, this is culture, this is artists, but they're trying to show the grave violations. I told also that culture is a way of explaining human rights, right? In education. I think one of the best examples that really shook me was the first time I visited the Apartheid Museum in South Africa. Has anybody been there? Yeah, some of you, yeah, so you might know this. So like I remember when I entered and you go to this beautiful garden and you were giving a little ticket, right? And there was a lady, she told me, don't look at this ticket. And I went to the 2 big doors and she said, now you can turn the ticket. And I turned it and he said, you are black. And I had to enter to a door when it says you're black. And then, during 1 hour, I was stripped of all my basic human rights. I mean, of course, it was an hour, it was an educational moment, but it was a very effective way of showing everybody in a short way, how was it using culture for that. I'm going to be brief, because I think my time is running out. But culture is also a very clear way of abusing human rights. It's used in warfare. It's a matter of warfare. You can see it all through history. We saw it in Daesh in Iraq, we saw it in Syria, we saw it in Lebanon. We also see culture as a way of showing power. During communism, we saw buildings being built to show power and repression. Ceausescu's palace, for example, in Romania, the Palace of Culture in Warsaw, Motherland in Ukraine. It's a way of showing power while people are starving. 2 more, then I'm ready. Culture as a way of hiding and neglecting human rights. Who history is told. I mean, this is all over the world. Go out here in Stockholm, you will see statues. It will be statues of men. Look at the name of the streets. It will be names of men. Women have all through history been hidden. And that's a very powerful way of making people invisible. The same with minorities all over the world. In Europe, we have one very big minority, the Roma minority. if you look around, you will not find a lot of statues of the great artists, of the great musicians, of all the great artists we've had that are Roma. You will not find statues and places named by them. So this is a way of actually repressing history through culture. And last and not least, culture is also a way of handling trauma and a way of redress after severe human rights violations. All over the world you see murals. Murals as telling the stories that are not told in any way. Street art is a perfect example, I think, of that. Another one, actually using it as a redress, and I know this because I know, Diego, you told me you were from Brazil, the inter-American system. I love the courts there. I love the way they work in that sense, because what they do, the European court can only give you a fine, for example, or it can say that a country has not adhered to human rights. But in the American system, they go further. They actually say, because the state has made a human rights violation, now you have to make a museum, you have to make a building, you have to have a school named after this minority, for example. So they actually use totally different rules.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Hannah.
you.
We're going to have to move on.
I didn't have that much time, but sorry. I hope you got it.
We will have a discussion. I think I will move over to you, Per. And I think we will just interact a little bit with questions. And so what you mentioned is but just tell us a little bit briefly about what you work with right now. What does Folke Bernadotte Academy work with at the moment?
Yes.
That links to this expression, freedom of expression, cultural rights.
Yeah, but thank you. So Per Olsson Frid, currently Director General of the Folke Bernadotte Academy, FBA, as we say. It's much faster.
Yeah.
We are a Swedish government agency working on peace, security, and development. So we give, we support peace processes around the world, both in the build-up on creating the preconditions for peace, for sustainable peace and security. But we also help facilitating peace processes, peace talks, and we give technical advice and support also the mechanisms that come after a peace treaty, the disarmament, the demobilization of armed groups, for example, or the democratization of security forces, the security sector. We are strong in making sure that peace is inclusive, so that youth are involved, that women are involved in peace building and peace processes. So this we do. We quite a depending on who you ask, small or big, but around 200 people in the agency, and we work in let's say 15, 20 different conflict-affected contexts around the world.
And standing in this paradigm shift, as I mentioned earlier on, where we see that human rights activists are suddenly reframed as terrorists, for instance, climate activists and so on, and also pro-Palestinian demonstrators have been subjected to this. What do you see the challenges for culture activists or culture bearers today in the world? What do you think are the biggest challenges?
First, what I want to say is that I think culture is the first victim of war. This is what you go after. I mean, if you go to Kiev these days, you see statues and monuments and buildings being packed with protection, because the war on Ukraine is a war on Ukraine nationality, it's a war on Ukraine culture. And as an answer to that, you see also a strong wave of uprising for the Ukraine, language and literature and so on. So culture is a first victim of war in many sense. Conflict also, I mean, as humans, we are different layers of identity. Culture is very often the force that helps us understand that, the complexity of being human, right? But in conflict, we are forced to choose one or the other of these layers. There's not space in conflict for nuances, right? And that changes also the role of culture. It can help us, choose that layer, but it can also help us again regain the multifaceted, layers of being human. I think. Culture culture in terms of conflict is very connected to the backlash. The rise, we have a record high number of conflicts in the world right now, and it's very connected to the democratic backlash that we see globally. So the backlash on human rights, the backlash on gender equality, the backlash on democratic governance is very connected to the rise of conflict. And of course the space where culture can be free is very connected to this.
And do you see that this is being challenged? at the moment?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's I mean, this is the time of autocrats, and there are so many ways of narrowing down the space for culture and artistic freedom. I mean, we've seen in Hungary, for example, without changing the legislation, you can do a shift of who is actually directing the different cultural institutions, and through that you can affect the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, what stories are being told, and so on in a society. And then when the EU points at Hungary saying, what is it that you're doing, they can say, well, look, our legislation is just as fine as any other European country. So there's so many means for the ones who want to shrink cultural space that do so. However, what we know, and what gives me a lot of hope, is that culture and cultural artists, they always find the cracks in these closed autocratic societies to, you know, where they can break in and where they can still. I mean, culture is the last resort for a free mind and a free thought, and it always is. So we have to also to rely and help culture in that sense.
As you understand, we have so many interesting topics we could talk for hours here, but I'm going to have to move on. That was like a bridge to Ramy, I think. Can you not use this phone? I think you can use this phone here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Good.
it's easier.
Thanks.
Like the old days, like the French, you know. They always do this with the microphones. Have you seen French television? They always do this with the microphone. Don't know what it is.
Yes.
Ramy, the bridge was directly to you, I think, and because you were in the Egyptian revolution, and tell us a little bit about what music meant during that momentum of the Arab Spring, when the world was watching and thought things were going to change.
Okay, music was the language, the common language of the people, the language where for people that would never meet or have a conversation or be in the same place in the same time ever, but they ended up there because they were asking for their freedom for the first time. And when you could hear like 500 Southern people singing as one voice, this was the most powerful thing I could see and experience in my life. And to see how it can give hope, how it can unite people, and how it can express what people sometimes cannot say, but a piece of music or a piece of art can just come and tell it all. So it also shaked the regime many, many times through the years of the fight, the last 10 years.
And what was just a few words from your song that really caught on to people? What was it?
Like I had this song that called Irhal, which means leave, and the main concept of the song is that I was just listening to the chants of the people in the demonstrations, and I felt that if we can take the chants and make it into music, make it into song, it will be more powerful. So I took the three main chants at the time, كلنا ايد واحدة وطلبنا حاجة واحدة ارحل. We are all one hand, have one demand, leave. That was the one that I wrote. And then هو يمشي مش هنمشي, he leaves, we stay. يسقط حسني مبارك, down Mubarak. So I took the words from the people, I added one line, I made it a very simple beat, and then from the first time I started to sing it on the stage, people knew the lyrics already for a couple of days, so you just felt that it came from them. So that was the start of the whole story for me and the revolution.
And then what happened? We thought, just to quote another famous musician, it was blowing in the wind, the change, yeah?
Yes.
But it was a big crackdown, and you ended up in jail, I think.
Yeah, as soon as the dictator Mubarak went away and the army took over, I was arrested and tortured to death. And I survived this experience, and I came out and I understood that just having a guitar and singing peacefully in the street could make these people with tanks and weapons extremely scared and shaking. And I could see that in them. That's why I understood the power of the music that day, and that this is a responsibility that I have to continue with. And I have been doing that since this day.
But you had to change country. You had to move to Europe.
Yeah.
In Finland, Malmö. You ended up in Malmö.
Yes.
And you've been in EU. So you're a musician and a human rights activist in the EU now.
Yep.
What is the difference from your first experience?
Okay, I had to leave Egypt because I was arrested for the second time, and then I was just, this was the time to leave. And then there was this Safe Haven Artist at Risk program that is started in Norway, but also in Sweden, and especially in Sweden, it's in so many cities. So I ended up in Malmo, and I being in the EU, I have to start with this, clearing this part out, that I am thankful for Sweden and also for Finland, because when I came here, I had the chance to continue my message. If I was in Egypt, I would be in jail or dead. When I came here, I had the chance to continue my message. And this is great, and I'm thankful for that. But this was 10 years ago, and things have been changing like drastically in so many ways. And I don't know how much this chance will be still there for other artists to also take it as I did. And when I came here, I could see like a massive shift also in the changes in the human rights and the values that the countries in Europe stands for. And when we're talking about culture, and for me, culture is the voice of the people. Culture and art is the voice of the people. And that to see that even Nordic countries and the rest of Europe are like really cutting down funds for art, for culture, for education. And if you're doing these cuts, you're cutting the voice of the people, and you're diminishing the freedom of expression anyway.
But you're also critical towards what's happening in the EU when it comes to freedom of expression.
Yeah, because like now, if you even in an indirect way cutting money for funding people that any marginalized genre or music or venues, and these people, when they lose the money, and you're forcing the artist in an indirect way that they have to go to the more pop music, and the machines in the music industry and the commercial machines are just increasing in power, and it's all the music now is becoming entertaining, and you're forcing the upcoming artists to understand that if I will choose the political path, I might not make a living, I will not be able to sustain my career, then I will end up in the other side of the pop music, and that's not helping.
But is it not also, if you express certain political points of views in Europe today, that you are not invited anymore to certain events?
Yeah, there is, of course. I heard behind closed doors in some festivals, because I am very open about my thoughts, and I say it very loud. So there have been many places that I couldn't perform there anymore. And I'm not the only artist that is like that. There are people in Europe that they lose their job because of an opinion, and also for the artists it's the same thing.
And can we say it here, what they are against, or is it secret?
We can just start with Gaza, with Palestine, and what's going on there. If you talk about that, you're not welcome. Even if you talk about the human rights in Ukraine, you're good. But if you talk about the human rights in Palestine, you are not welcome anymore. And that's not a new thing, by the way. 7 years ago, before the genocide started in Palestine, I was in Germany, and I was having a gig, and because they knew that I have a song supporting Palestine, the gig was cancelled. And I was like really shocked by like double standard and double molars, and I was pretty shocked to see that in Europe, because when we live in the Middle East, we have this idea about Europe and America that things they are different, but in the end, not really in so many ways.
Okay, we're running over time already, but I'm going to move over to Diego. We can discuss this a little bit later. You can also ask questions to Diego and Per and Hannah. Diego, you work with in the intersection of I can't pronounce it. You better pronounce it. Tell us what you do, your work, co-collaboration, and this discipline that you're trying to impose to make change.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to my co-panelists here, and I get goosebumps, and I think it's already so rich, everything we heard from all of you, and there's so much to talk about that. My work is in some ways, well, I'm a filmmaker. I produce and direct films and performances, and I also work with research in this interface between arts and science. I have a research project at the Stockholm Resilience Center. And my work has been a lot about articulating the role of the arts in the transformations that we need to go through if we are to live within planetary boundaries, if we are to create a sustainable society around the world. So I see really the arts as a leader in that space, rather than something that comes at the end to sort of tell the story. I think within the arts there's so much capacities and skills that are actually really fundamental to that. And by that I mean it's clear from the examples that we heard here. You know, people are, whenever we're going through crisis, there's always an artist who, or an activist, or somebody who's actually there writing a song and as Per says, kind of breaking through the cracks and exceeding that crisis with hope and with insight. So the work that I do, it's about articulating that. But in some ways, it's also kind of surprising that we need to be discussing, you know, is art or culture important for these times? And because I feel like there's never been a radical change in the past without artists and cultural workers being in the forefront. So I feel like it's perhaps a little bit of a misconception that we have in the general society of thinking of arts and culture as this kind of elite system, right? And I think a little bit I gather from your talk, Ramy, that maybe it's this kind of cult of the celebrity that needs to be sort of dismantled in a way, and the industry as this kind of just for profit, and rather focus on the arts as this area where we create communities, create connections, this area where we create insights about our current situations, and this area where we tap into the imagination of what this world could be and what the society could be. So
and I know that you said also that the EU has missed a great opportunity to create a vision for the people of what the sustainable change could mean. You're critical towards what they're doing.
I think when we speak about, for example, the Green New Deal, in a way, the Green New Deal is a vision, right? For
not everyone knows what that is, I think, but just briefly, it's a lot of laws and regulations that companies and countries need to follow to reduce emissions and other things.
Well, in some ways, that's the sort of, it comes from the European Union, this vision of reducing carbon emissions and being carbon neutral by 2050. But the thing is that I feel like oftentimes these visions, they come from the top, and then, like you said, companies need to follow, and everybody, you know, citizens need to follow and fall in place. Whereas I feel that the role of the arts is also that of helping us, in a way, embody visions or develop these visions from the ground up, right? And really build from our imaginations and how, in the ways we would like our communities to be, right? So it's about making these visions alive in a particular place rather than just being a bunch of rules that we need to follow.
Mm.
And my work has been around these we call knowledge co-creation processes, right? How do you work with communities to co-create knowledge about the future?
So how to create the future, how to rewrite history, because the winner always write the history, how to protest authoritarian leaders and so on. Culture can be so many things. And now we're going to put up here on a Mentimeter screen. We would like you, we're going to discuss more interactively later on, but this first thing was just to get you to know these people a little bit. So we have a Mentimeter up here, and you can answer some questions. If there has been an artist in your life, could be a musician, writer, artist with pictures or poetry that has made a change in your life. And if so, in what way did this artist affect you? You can see the questions in the Mentimeter. The fourth question is, should art be political? And the fifth question is, should society fund artists? So first question, name an artist that has made it something that made you change something in your life. And in what way did this affect you? And should it be political, or should society fund artists? And meanwhile, as you do that, we can start discussing together now. I thought I will get back to. Do you want to say something?
No, not yet.
Okay, so Diego, what do you think is the biggest challenge right now to artistic freedom?
Wow, what a big question. I think in some ways we speak about sort of cultural wars in a way, you know, in understanding that there are multiple sort of fields creating culture. We never sort of in a void. It's not just like one system. And I think creating spaces where we can actually see each other in a real way, for me it's one of the critical things that I feel are still missing. I mean, I can talk about what I have in mind actually, and I'll mention as a concrete example. I was fortunate enough to train in the tradition of Augusto Boal. He's a theater person from Brazil who developed a series of techniques around participatory theater. So how do you actually use theater as a way to activate communities and to get people to be part of that theater? And Boal ended up using even as a legislative theater, used theater as a way to create policies and so on. And I feel that in some ways is that work with the arts as a space where we feel as active agents in this crisis and not just passive audiences.
Anyone would like to comment on challenges or something?
I can talk about the hate speech being supported by leaders, and that this is very, very dangerous for the culture, because I'm one of the people that love to believe that yeah, every people has their own culture, but culture should be something that we can all enjoy and share together. And with the hate speech out there, it's the opposite direction for that. And of course, the right wing being empowered, that's hurting the culture in all ways, and the lack of funds and the war machine increasing and sucking money out of everything else. These are challenges that we are dealing with.
On a bit of a, if I try to be a little bit provocative, can culture also be part of the problem? I mean, we have the filter bubbles, we have deep fakes, we have artists that are, you know, promoting authoritarian values or anti-feministic values and that sort of thing. Are we seeing this polarization? Could it be a part of the problem?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I still would love to believe that like every artist out there should have the right to say what they want, and if there is no hate in the message, and if there is no harm, I don't think that the culture is the threat for the culture itself. I don't see it like that.
What do you say, Per? Some people think that culture is the threat and they want to ban books. We've heard you know, examples of countries who want to do this, the US for instance.
Yeah, there's of course plenty of examples of how culture is also used to shrink space or to overthrow you know, institutions and human rights principles and freedom of expression and so on. But I tend to agree with Ramy that I think if there is space for cultural freedom and freedom of expression, you don't have to be that afraid over the type of discussion and debate that will happen within that cultural sphere. And that is good for society, because we need to be mirrored. We need those reflections, and we need that type of discussion. And if we can have it within culture, we will be a lot better equipped to have that discussion also outside of the cultural, also in the political space. And we're losing, right now we're losing the opportunity, we're losing the ability to cope with a vivid, dynamic political discussion. And we're afraid of it.
And why are we losing it now, you mean?
Because we're not allowing it in any other space. So we need the cultural sphere, the political sphere, and other spheres to coexist, to be able and feed each other with perspectives and so on.
What do you say, Hanna? Do you think there is a good culture and a bad culture?
Oh, I have this one.
You have your own.
No, I mean, what I think is sort of problematic is because everything has some kind of boundaries. You talk about speech, right? Hate speech. And I think that's the perfect example, because on one hand, in these polarized times, people want simple answers. They want to, you have to choose. You have to be on a side. You have to say yes or no. So all these pluralism and complexity of culture sometimes is also lost. So for example, culture for me, it's always been like the foremost part of peace building. You have people from countries who are in war with each other, but when you look at it, not on the political level, but on the level of the people, they together with culture can, they create peace in a way that is like amazing. And in the same way, what I think is, so for example, where is the border? We had, from the organization, I'm the, as you mentioned, Ylva, I'm the chair of a human rights organization. We work globally in 50 countries, but we work in Sweden as well. And so in Sweden, I don't know if everybody heard about this, but there's been a person, he's actually Danish, but he's been coming to Sweden and burning the Quran. And so, for example, you would have people in Sweden saying, oh, he can do whatever he wants because he bought the book, right? Or he can do whatever he wants because it's a cultural expression. Whereas the organization that I'm the chair of, we considered this actually to be hate speech. So what we did is we took this, we did a complaint about this, and then last week, I didn't know if you followed this, but there was actually the first court case. And it actually, and he was found guilty of hate speech. So there is no simple answers. It's always about looking at the borders of everything. Culture should be free. I think you should be able to say anything you want, but not in any way you do it, at any place and at any time, right? So and you don't get like a manual. In human rights law, you don't get a manual saying, here is the exactly border. I want you to be able to sing about everything, but if you start singing that you should kill people, okay, yeah, that's a cultural expression, right? But when does the border go? When you start having people out in the streets killing people because of what you know, it's difficult discussions. So perhaps we got off topic now, but I thought it was like really interesting.
No, but I think you're touching on also how does then the political sphere misuse or exploit what's said with another under other circumstances in the cultural sphere. I think that change is not limited by what we know, but what we can imagine, and that goes also for peace processes. If we can imagine coexistence, if we can imagine what a peaceful society looks like, we are able also to work for that and to make it happen. But without that imagination, it will never happen. So during apartheid, without culture, you couldn't imagine having an equal society where black people were also free. But with culture, that imagination can happen, and then eventually it happens. And I think that says much of what we need culture for. But again, we can't tell culture, we can't instruct culture to do that for us. But by setting a scene or a space where culture is free, we can rely on culture for that to happen.
And at the same time, are we seeing a backlash right now on liberal democracy? You know, the liberal democracy has failed to end poverty, homelessness is increasing, conflicts, propaganda. Do you think that we have failed? This is what we're seeing, a backlash on democracy?
Yeah, liberal democracy haven't done good enough, but it's still the best tool we have. So it's not, the answer is probably yes, but the conclusion from that answer is not that has to be the end of liberal democracy, I think. But
Ramy,
we have to do better, of course. Of course we have to do better. We can't live in a world where, you know, more than 700 million women live this close to an armed conflict. I mean, of course that's a failure for us and for liberal democracy, but it's, again, as Hannah said in your introduction, I mean, very few of us nowadays live in democracies. So, you know, you can also, of course, question who is it that fails.
Could I just add one thing? Just
I think Ramy wanted to say something.
I agree with you, and just my problem with the democracy out there that we suffer with a lot of selective focus. Like, just not everyone have the right for democracy or enjoying the democracy, even if we all live in the same place. If you will support certain ideas, again, like the things that we said earlier, you will not be able to enjoy that or to be part of the society in that sense.
Hannah, briefly, did you want to comment, Diego?
No, I totally agree with you, because even in the democracy you have so much segregation, you have inequalities, you have groups of people who do not have access to the same rights. But there is one little difference that I thought about it yesterday, because I was in another seminar and I was being quite vocal, which my organization is also, on the things that we do not think are so good right now in Sweden, where we live, right? So we've been quite critical, and there's been people threatening us, saying they would take away our funds, etc., etc. But I also acknowledge one fact. Because I live in a democracy, I know I can stand on that stage in front of so many people, I can be critical. I will probably get my inbox with a lot of men being angry at me and things like that. But there's not going to be a police who's going to come and put me into jail because I'm saying this, right? I'm not going to be put into jail and tortured because I actually said this. And this is, I mean, that's also the core of democracy, of the democratical values of the state. So there is no other system that I believe in higher, but that does not mean that in a democracy human rights are equal or even accessed by everybody, because that's really not the case in the world and not in Sweden. So. Yep.
Diego, would you like to comment?
No, just to, I concur with the idea that it's not because, yes, we see a backlash because of the improvement of rights of many groups, but I don't think the solution is, okay, let's go to the other side. I think we should double down into exploring the areas of culture and open up spaces for cultural imagination, because I think we're just starting really to understand the ways in which art is an instrument for change, and I think that's I don't think the solution is to sort of back down now because there is some kind of backlash around it.
Ramy?
I want to follow with what Hannah said about being safe here to do that and to be here without being arrested at the door. That's the reality now, but in so many other countries in Europe, it's fading to the wrong direction. And when you know that in UK people can be harassed by the authority or even arrested sometimes because posts on internet, and that started to be happening in Europe and other places as well, this is something that is going extremely to the wrong direction. So something that we're taking for granted today, and people like in Sweden especially like trust the system so much and rely on the system so much, and they don't go out to the streets enough to ask for the rights and to make the change. And this is something that everybody that has a privilege should do. So I hope that we will always be able to do that in Sweden without being arrested at the door.
What are they arrested for?
Sorry?
What are they arrested for in the UK? What are you referring to?
It was things related to Gaza,
okay.
to Palestine. So and in other countries in Europe as well. So like this is a wrong direction in so many places that we have to go out and stop that from happening.
Yes, I agree. Let's take a look at your influences, and then we can take some audiences and see what have influenced you. Diego, do you want to start? What do you see up here?
I see Jorge Drexler, which is one of my favorite singer-songwriters there. Jorge Drexler, it's from Uruguay, living in Guernica, beautiful, Bansky. So these were the name of the artist that has made.
Is there anyone here that influenced you, or did you have another one that really changed you when you were?
I think certainly Jorge Drexler, but for me, one artist that was very influential was Sebastião Salgado. He's a photographer, again from Brazil, who has done a lot of documentation on unfair systems of exploitation around the world.
So it was someone who was discussing rights. What about you, Hannah? Do you recognize anyone here, and is it someone you would choose?
Of course, I recognize a lot of people. I mean, Chimamanda is a very big inspiration as a feminist, of course. But I also, because you asked us this question, like, who would you think about? And there's so many, but I actually thought about one person, about peace building and everything. And it's a mural artist, a female mural artist from Poland called Natalia Rak, because I love murals. It is actually the art of human rights for me. And she was allowed as first person actually to draw a mural on a church. And this was really amazing, both that the church allowed this, but also that she actually did this. And for me, she's amazing because she pushes the boundaries that you think can't be pushed with this. And I also love, because to be honest with you, culture, and especially murals, it's a male dominant still. A lot of the arts and a lot of the culture is mostly men. So they are within culture, even if we think we're equal, there's also a lot of inequality. So for me, I tend to have a heart for female artists, and in my home I have a lot of paintings, and all of them are actually by female artists. So, yeah.
What about you, Per? Do you see anyone up here that you would like to mention? And is it the same one that you would write, or?
There is an example here of a painting, Guernica.
Picasso, that is.
Picasso. And I think it's a beautiful example for how a battle that there's for sure a lot of forces that would want everyone to forget. But through Picasso, it's now It's now a memory that we all share. Everyone who have seen the painting is a witness for that battle and what happened there. And I think it's such a powerful example. My example was a female writer, Berta von Suttner. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1905. In the late 10 years before that, she published a book in Sweden. It's called Ned med vapnen. The English title would be Put Down Your Arms or something like this. So it's a fiction. It's a fiction novel. There's a war between Germany and Denmark, and this woman who is born into a family of army men starts questioning militarization. She starts questioning pro-extreme nationalistic thoughts, and becomes a voice for peace and anti-militarization. And when the book was published, it was a huge thing. No one had ever read anything like that at that time in Europe. She was awarded the Peace Prize in Peace, not in literature, 1905, and her book was burnt in 1933. You know, when the Nazis had their what's called in English, bokbålet. When they burnt the books in Germany. And again, there's an example again. How powerful is culture when you need to burn books to make sure that your thought is the dominating one. And the Nazis were very good at erasing Jewish culture and other types of cultural expression that was against their thought. Didn't matter if it was music, if it was books, or anything else. Culture is extremely powerful because it makes us imagine that it doesn't have to be like this. It can be it could be something else. You know?
Ramy, what do you think when you see these?
I want to just follow Per about the power of culture and art. I always think and believe that they can arrest me, they can kill me, but they cannot stop me from creating a song in my head. They can't come in my head here to stop the process of creativity. And as soon as it's done, if any artist finish a piece and share it with one person, and this person will take it and give it to another person, it will live forever. And there is no force, there is no armies in the world that can stop that from spreading. So that's about the power of art. And the name that I can relate to here is Nina Simone. But for me, what really made me start music and make music in general is rock music, because of the anger in the rock music and helping the young me to control my anger and to put it in the right direction.
I think for me also it was a lot of music, and when I was thinking about this seminar, I was thinking that when I was young, it was punk, it was rock and roll, male-dominated, but there was also a disco movement. And if you listen to what they sang, it was a lot of black artists, like Marvin Gaye. What's going on? And that made me realize, what's going on. And all the guys said, this is shit music, but I thought, this is not so bad, actually. Let's see the next picture. In what way did this affect you? Social change, provoked reflections, tackle challenges, sense of normality, connect to human levels. These are all powerful words, I think. Anyone wants to comment? I mean, it's basically what you all said also a little bit. It's not getting into the head. Should it be political? Now that's a political question. We know that Russia used a lot of artists against their will, Mayakovsky and so on. And they became like the, Soviet artists. What do you think, Per? Should art be political?
I think art is political. And
that's a diplomatic answer.
No, but I think the question implies that someone can decide over culture.
Exactly.
No one should decide over culture in that sense. But so culture should be free, and free culture will be political. But because it will challenge me, it will tell me who I am in a way that I didn't think of myself, and I'm not necessarily comfortable with that. But I still have to face myself through culture, by connecting, by understanding, even seeing, the human in every human, even in my enemy. That's only culture that can do that. So should it be political? I think the question is wrong. It is political, and it has, and that's the beauty of it.
What do you say, Diego?
Well, just to say that I think it's part of the problem to think that art is not political. You know, that actually art is just there to somewhat entertain us or to serve as some kind of glow that comes at the end of life making, which is this process of realizing who we are and who the other is. So yes, that's part of what we need to be sort of fighting against in a way, is to realize the power of art.
Hanna, you want to say something about this question, or should we move to the next one? Ramy, you want to say something?
Yeah.
You disagree?
I agree.
You agree? Okay, last question. Should society fund artists? Here we are at the EU seminar, right? EU funds artists.
What do we mean with the society here? Like with the individuals, or like with the NGOs, like or the state?
Should the governments, or like EU or the UN, or
Okay.
so as a societal body, should they fund artists, or should they depend on the market capacity to sell records or whatever?
No, they should. Yeah. That's it.
No, I just think that it's also there's different ways of doing it that I think it's worth highlighting. If you have enough at least funded public museum, then there is space for artists to show their art. If there is enough public space for youth to learn to play an instrument, or a stage where they can have their first concert, that's a way to fund artists. So it's not just the funding to the individual artists that is important, but it's the whole infrastructure where culture and cultural space and artists can be born and express and feel. And where, Hanna so eloquently put it in the beginning, the rest of us are right to actually listen, learn to be touched by these artists. That happens in a space within an infrastructure that also need, funding to exist. If we leave all of that to commercial funding streams, there's going to be a lot of culture that doesn't really, reach us.
I know you mentioned some interesting examples of the Sami culture. Do you remember what you said about that? That it's, yeah?
I think I remember what I said. But of course, the Sami relation to Sweden, or Sweden's relation to the Sami culture is filled with things that Sweden have for a long time left out of its history books, and the story of Sweden, the storytelling of Sweden, because we're very not comfortable with the fact that we colonized Sápmi once, and the fact that we still do so in different ways. And I'm born in the very south of Sweden. I grew up knowing almost nothing about Sami culture. And then 10 years ago, there was a movie called Sameblod that came out in Sweden's cinemas. And I think that was the start of a revival of Sami culture. And since then we have had painters, writers being published, telling a story of Sweden that we're very not comfortable with. That gives also me a responsibility. That gives all of us a responsibility. We have to understand and read and see and put ourselves, see ourselves in the Sami population and answer us, is this how we want Sweden to be or not? So it forces us to do so. And this is, of course, in a non-democratic state, these funding streams to Sami culture will be cut immediately, because they would challenge the very notion of Swedish nationality. But it's not. There is still space, because we have a very decentralized cultural infrastructure. So there is still space for these stories to be told, for these artists to express themselves. And I think just to say that's extremely important. But we also have to look out, of course, because as soon as that space is being shrunk, as soon as that funding is being shrunk, that means something.
And also, as you said, Ramy, maybe there is a movement that you shouldn't express certain views because then you don't get the funding. Do you have any experience of this from Latin America or Brazil? Or Diego, what do you think? Do you think it's dangerous also to be dependent on the right kind of culture?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if you're in a society that suddenly shifts to a more authoritarian view, like happened in Brazil, for instance, and how does that then affect the artists who were dependent on funds? I mean, how do you stay clear of that?
You can't really, because yeah, especially in countries like Brazil and others, you know, the public funding is already very scarce, and then when you start cutting that, obviously a lot of artists are impacted. But I think it's not a coincidence, you know, it's not, we already said perhaps multiple times here that these cuts actually happen because people understand the power of art and what art can do. I think that, you know, in some ways we don't really question whether we should fund medicine or education, and if we understand, I think it's interesting to think about in terms of, you open up the event saying we are facing these major transformations, and the interesting thing about a transformative process is that you don't really know who you're going to be on the other side of a transformation. If it's a real transformation, if you're just adapting, changing things, you can still maintain some kind of core center. But if it's a true transformation, it means that we're going to have to live in a very different world if we are to transform it. So then how do we do that process of imagination, or of going into a space that we don't know who what we will be? And then I think that that's what the arts can do very powerfully, I think, to help us and guide us into this very unknown process of transformations. So then I don't see any other part of society that can do as well as the arts. So then what is the question? Shall we fund it or not? I think it's like, yes, we must, because that's the light that we could have at this point.
All right, we have a few minutes left. Anyone wants to ask our panelists a question before Ramy will perform something for us? Anyone has a question? I will see if I can see someone here, someone brave. Anyone has a question? Did you have a question? Okay. Can you say it loudly, or maybe?
I have a question to Ramy. Yes. And what are your experiences of using music as a tool to mobilize people and raising society issue in Egypt? It is important music for people, for every country. For example, I am from Kurdistan. Music for us very important, and for Egyptian people must be important about this relation we have.
So your question is, how does he use his music to mobilize the Egyptian people, if you do? How do you use your music to mobilize the Egyptian people?
As an artist, I don't think like that. It's not like I want to make a song to like make the people do something. I don't see it like this. I do what I believe in, and I try to be a mirror to the street and try to listen to what the people want to say, and I try to put that in music, but not from that point of view that I think about something and they want the people to follow that. But in the revolution, when the revolution was happening, that was a little bit of a different story, because I was already like an artist, was my guitarist sleeping in a tent in Tahrir Square for days or sometimes for weeks, and then just the idea is born in the heart of the event, and so it comes natural. And sometimes some of the songs were like the chant that we talked about in the beginning. It was made to take down the dictator, so that, but also it didn't come just from my head. It was born from the event and from the moment. So I hope I could answer the question.
Is it not so, Ramy, that your song still is very important in the Arabic world?
I believe so, yes. I mean I have been living here for 10 years, and I never stopped making music, and I released many songs that have been reached million of views to the movement and also to the region, not just in Egypt.
Okay, we have someone who has a question here. I think you have to either scream or come close to the microphone because the cord is not that long.
Can you hear me? Or? Hello. First of all, thank you so much for very interesting discussions. And my question is to Carl Frid? Yeah, sorry. Yes. Like, because we're moving into a society with more like a more internet-based society and digitalization, like social media. If you could just comment on that briefly, like the role of the connection with culture and what's happening with that.
Do you mean if it's good or bad for?
Just like if you have some comments on what's the connection with culture now and what's going to happen in society with like the space for culture, maybe just some comments on.
You mean if AI and the robots are going to take over? Per, please comment. I was just joking.
What is it that they, being they, the unknown they, usually say is that the internet or the new digital era is neither good or bad, but it depends on how we're using it. But my perspective is that social media is not a free space. You enter there and you enter a jungle of algorithms that someone can control, and you have to be very aware of that. So it's quite difficult to, but you can still use social media, of course, to mobilize. But I at least personally find it increasingly difficult to navigate through social media to understand what is a democratic conversation here and what is, you see social media use in the American election now. It dropped, I think, by like, 20-30% the day after the election. And there were comments on saying that that's proof of how many of the tweets and Instagram published that during the election campaign that just came from different bots. So I think it's extremely difficult to navigate through that. We saw the election in Moldova just a few weeks ago. Extreme pressure from Russia on trying to affect people's opinion and thought to that election through, among other things, social media. And I think this is a dilemma, and I don't have the answer to it. A dilemma of our time is that we believe in free speech. We believe in free internet, but can we protect ourselves from free internet? Or so when we protect democracy, do we, how do we do that? Do we want to close down accounts that promote hate speech? Then we are closing down accounts.
Well, then we're back at the good and the bad.
And we don't want to do that. So I think this is a huge dilemma, and I think that's why also internet is still not governed, because we don't really know where to put down our feet in this discussion. So I think it's a really good question, but we have to help each other try to answer it.
I think Diego would like. Sorry.
Yeah, please. Diego probably have the answer. That's
no, I just wanted to say something because I'm very passionate about it. Being from Brazil, I noticed the shift, and also living away from it and visiting the country with like a span of 4 years in between. I noticed how people's minds, the people close to me, had changed so dramatically, and I can only blame that into some kind of social media process because. Well, the way people explain reality and what's going on, it's based on memes, it's based on these short videos that go viral within different groups, and it very much, it's because of this infrastructure that we live in. The thing is, like, we should understand that these platforms that exist out there, they are not neutral, right? What they want to do is make us believe that they are neutral, that they want to become invisible, right? But as you said, it's like it's actually the algorithm is shifting what we see and what we're exposed to, and creating this polarization that actually we observe. So I think, yes, your question is really to the point that this digital world is fundamentally affecting the way culture evolves and the possibilities of it. But I think that is only to say that what also Per mentioned before, the importance of investing in institutions like art spaces and investing in independent art, so that people can be out there in the squares and tell different stories than what you just see digitally. Because I feel like we as societies, we are much more fragmented online than we are in real life. In real life, we are able to meet and to see each other, but online is really difficult.
Just the last thing that Diego mentioned about like the parallel world online when it comes to activism, it just drives me crazy, because like a lot of people are online, believe that they are doing something for the change. Of course I respect everybody's putting any effort in doing that, but if you don't take that to the street, it doesn't make the real change, doesn't make the real difference. And the governments like Egypt, for example, they will, and other countries as well, they will try to criminalize your posts on social media to make you feel that by sharing a post you did something great, that you are brave to do that. And of course everybody does that in a country like Egypt, is brave, but still they succeed like psychologically, mentally, to make you believe that when you're sitting at home and sharing a post that you did something amazing. But in the end you are not in the streets, and then nothing will happen in the end. People has to be in the streets.
And by that, I think we're going to have to end this discussion. Maybe we should have another seminar on AI and social media. But I think that Axel would like to introduce our last. Thank you so much, all the panelists.
And thank you also to Ylva for moderating. We're a bit short on time, so I'll keep it super brief. Ramy, we promised live music. We will offer live music. And we're going to round off on this as well. There is a restaurant. If you want to eat something afterwards, that's available. But otherwise, this is going to be the end of the seminar. Thank you so much for listening, and happy to have you here.
Sorry, Diego. We have time for 2 songs. The first song is called رسالة إلى مجلس أمن الأمم المتحدة, a letter to the UN Security Council. In the revolution in Egypt, I realized that one of the biggest challenges and enemies we had was lack of education. One of the saddest days when we had to be fighting each other sometimes in the streets, actually fighting the poor, that we are fighting for their rights and for better life for everyone. It was hard to see them supporting the dictator. And when I came to Europe also, I thought that things would be better with the choices of the people when it comes to who's leading the countries, but it's not that good either here. And I realized that it's not about the school then, only at least. It's about people going out to the streets and actually learning from the school of life, meeting other people and sharing their culture. That's the school that I belong to. But this song is about people that never had the chance to learn how to write or to read, but they still wanted to send letters to the UN Security Council. And the letters say, "Hey dear, in charge in the UN Security Council, I'm sending this letter, and it's not my first one. I know you're busy, but I hope that this is the one that will reach you and you'll read it. I want you to know that I don't understand you, I don't understand your language when you are in media speaking on my behalf. You don't know anything about me, my life, or my needs. And yes, I don't know how to write freedom, but I carry my own freedom. And being silent doesn't mean that I am weak. I'm careful. One day I will go out to the streets to take my rights. أرجو أن تصل كلماتي رغم مشاغلك يا مجلس أمن الأمم المتحدة. ليست هذه أولى رسالاتي. أرجو أن تصلك كلماتي رغم مشاغلك يا مجلس أمن الأمم المتحدة. ليست هذه أولى رسالاتي. هانذا الإنسان الدامي سن الجهل سيوف الحكام على صمتي ومن الظلمة خلق الظلم ونخاسي. أصبحت بلا علم أتبع وسواسي. أصبحت عدوا لصديقي فأنا أعرف سواتي. أصبحت غريبا في طريقي غيري يقرأ لي بوصلاتي. اختار لجهلي وجهاتي يا مولاي يا مولاي. أمين المجلس والأمناء جميعا في كل أمانات خيانة أحلامي يا مولاي. أمين المجلس والأمناء جميعا في كل أمانات خيانة أحلامي. قد لا أفهم كل الكلمات بتلفازي لكن أعرف أن هوى السجن ثقيل. قد لا أعرف أن أكتب كلمة حرية لكني أحمل معناها. فاعلم أن اليوم صرمي غدا قد ينفلت زماني يا مولاي فلتحذرني يا مولاي فلتحذرني يا مولاي فلتحذرني. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, shukran. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. It was such a great experience to have the panelists and Ilva. Thanks for the organization for having us. Thanks for all the workers for all the work that you did. Thanks for the house for hosting us. For every single person being with us in the room. I enjoyed every single minute, and I think we can all sing together this song. The song is called Sign bil-Alwan. Means the colorful prison. This song is very important to me and to the movement in Egypt, and I believe to any political movement out there. The writer of the song, of the lyrics, is Galal al-Bahari, a friend, a comrade, that is in jail for more than 6 years because of his poetry. And because of another song called Balaha that we did together. Galal wrote this song when he was a free human being, writing it for people behind bars, in particular to highlight the women's role in the Egyptian revolution. Egypt is a very macho man culture, and the revolution gave space to the women to be equal, at least a couple of years in the beginning. And it was a very good lesson to everybody that we need this to have a healthy society, and how much we all need to be equal and to have fair and justice. But Galal now is behind bars. And these days I love to sing the song to Gaza, to the people in Palestine that has been living in the biggest jail out there. So let's all sing together to Palestine, to Galal Bahiri, to all poets behind bars, and to all political prisoners out there. And we will sing this together like that. Yeah, 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 yeah. في سجن فيه وردة، على بابه فيه سجان، كل السجون واحدة، ده سجن بالألوان، 4 حيطان من نور، بتبارك العصيان، ليه الطيور بتحج وتصاحب القضبان. سجن فيه وردة، على بابه فيه سجان، كل السجون واحدة، ده سجن بالألوان، 4 حيطان من نور، بتبارك العصيان، ليه الطيور بتحج وتصاحب القضبان، لن تحبسوا وردة يا دولة العميان، يا وطن يا محتل، يا شعب غلبوا النوم، الليل عليكم هل والحكم فيه للبوم، كل الرجال سلموا، سنابته هتقوم، تكسب ضلال كتبكم وتحارب الفرعون. Yeah, 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 yeah. يا دولة المتاعيس العرف أفكاركم، المجد للمحابيس طول ما نفكركم. يا دولة المتاعيس العرف أفكاركم، المجد للمحابيس طول ما نفكركم. واللي بعتوا الظلم ما تقوملوش هما، الثورة هي الحل وابقوا اسألوا دوما. من تحبسوا وردة يا دولة العميان، يا وطن يا محتل، يا شعب غلبوا النوم، الليل عليكم هل والحكم فيه للبوم، كل الرجال سلموا، سنابته هتقوم، تكسب ضلال كتبكم وتحارب الفرعون. Let's sing this one. Yeah, 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 yeah.